We're not about bringing it to your home, nuclear waste to your home. We are also not about talking about building a new nuclear reactor nearby. And then we're not trying to turn you into a pro-nuclear individual, right? Instead, we just want to share information and have a dialogue and some questions. So what are we going to do with all this information and the questions that you give us, right? We are going to, the format that we're going to utilize it in is that you're asking questions. We've got some students with us. I'm going to introduce everyone shortly. And we are then going to collect that information from surveys and then some of the questions that you're asking us. We're going to make it anonymous, and we've been crisscrossing the United States, just like the other 12 groups, and they've been collecting information anonymously as well. But there's going to be some themes, and there's some definite questions that then we will share with the Department of Energy. So, before we go any further, we would like to have our first survey. No? Oh, no. What we want to do is ask you to kind of pull out your, should there be a
The emails is already.
QR?
No.
Yeah, I already emailed.
No, check
Oh, you
your
email,
emails.
okay. So everyone, check their emails. I'm so used to, I do this, and we usually do a QR code, so I'm blending things together and forgetting what we talked about. So if you go to your email, can we get our gentleman here? Oh, you have one? Your phone?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
No, I'm saying I already did the survey.
Oh, wonderful.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, look at that, I love it.
Sat out in the parking lot for 30 minutes.
And then you saw the message come up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Bam.
I love it.
Yeah.
And there I am going again, getting in front of the, and I keep on moving, sorry.
No, well, you have either already completed the survey or your session is expired.
Oh
And
dear.
I completed it. So it's
Thank you.
I'm sorry, you don't need to jump ahead.
No, you're just like me. I do the same thing. Welcome. Morning. How are you? Good.
Did they do the survey? Sorry.
When you walked in, did they tell you about a survey? Is it email?
Well, let me do this. Is there some place that we'll be able to go after the conference that we can see not only the inputs from this session, but the inputs from the
Should be on
other?
Zoom.
Yes, I'll share that.
See if there's see what the differences are. Where are your other sessions being held? There's one comment in
We did, well, remember, we've got about 12 groups that are doing it.
Okay.
So for us personally, I've done North Carolina, Chicago, Utah. We have lined up, going back to Utah, different location, to Las Vegas, etc.
I live in Pacific Florida.
Oh, lovely, lovely.
Worked out, right?
So, should I give a few more minutes? Okay.
That's why I don't have one for you tomorrow. Yeah. My whole suitcase and I like had it in the living room like ready to go and then I was like, oh my god, I didn't put any underwear. So
Absolutely.
Just keep an eye on the framing. Is it like the person is too small or is
Gonna do another check-in. Does anyone need more time? Yes? Well, thank you for that first survey. So onward we go on this adventure, right? So what does our day look like? So actually I like to always start with the bio break, right? Where are the facilities? So if you go through this door or you go around, right, and then you turn right again, you'll see the restrooms. We have tables outside for breaks, and we have the first one for breakfast, and then also we're gonna have a break at about 11:35. Yes. And then we're going to have lunch also included in this. So how are we going to structure the rest of our day? The introductions. You're up next in way of that. Yes, you're up next in way of introductions. You're going to meet the rest of the team, and then we want to get to know each other here in the audience as well. So I'm going to do an introduction about collaborative consent-based siting, and then we are going to have some testimonials from two organizations that we've been working with, Mothers for Nuclear and also Native Nuclear. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to have a presentation by a presentation from NC State in particular. And then we're going to have lunch, and then we're going to have a breakout sessions, right? So you can ask and comment on what you've heard and other questions that kind of are still there or come up as we're going through the whole process. And you want to ask of us. And we're going to go into even smaller groups, and you'll be able to chat with the individuals that you want to. And even maybe crisscross, right? You start with one individual, it's like, okay, I've asked my questions of that person, and I want to head over to another one of the organizations that have spoken. It makes sense at this point to introduce the rest of the team. So first up would be Scott. Do you want to come up and, right? So we've got, well, you're not just going to say hello.
Yeah.
Who are you?
Who am I? You want
Yeah,
my-
well, we're doing that later.
You're still in my
Scott?
presentation though.
Okay, sorry, so I won't do that. All right. This is Scott. And
Rob,
from NC State.
from NC State, North Carolina State University.
Hi, I'm Heather. I'm Fairstay, and we're with Mothers for Nuclear.
Thank you. All right. And then we've got some students in the audience, right? So do we just want to, and other individuals in the audience, do we want to say hello as well? I'm looking at these, so I'm gonna start with you all. Who are you?
Hi, I'm Erin Shannon. I'm a graduate student at NC State studying for my Master of Social Work.
Excellent.
I'm Jordan. I'm also at NC State. I'm doing my undergrad in nuclear engineering.
I know, right? Danny.
I'm Danny Zigan. I'm with Mothers and I'm at UT Austin.
And Ryan, we're just saying who we are.
And I'm Ryan Pickering from Native Nuclear, California.
Samantha Brantz from Native Nuclear.
I'm Asmine from NC State, graduate student at the Department of Nuclear Engineering.
Charles Baker, I'm with Native Nuclear.
Jean? Oh, and Jean, yes.
I'm Jean Nelson, just retired nuclear medicine technologist in Oklahoma lead for Mothers for Nuclear.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, so we've introduced everyone. So what about you? I'm gonna start over here.
Who am I?
Yeah. What do you want to share?
My name is Jerry Butterfield. I work in waste industry, worked on waste projects for 30, worked in the energy business as a consultant for 40 years,
Love it.
and I have a very jaded point of view.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Right? Love it.
My name is Chase Bird. This is Halton Bird. He's my son. I brought him along with me. We're
Lovely.
citizens. Just I have no background in energy. I was kind of curious. I work for the Chickasaw Nation. They're big fantastic. Great.
Thank you for being here.
It's great to be here.
I'm Michelle Wynn. I work for the Oklahoma Secretary of Energy and Environment.
Welcome. And then,
Hi, I'm Doug Sandridge, and I was a nuclear engineering major in 1979 at University of Oklahoma when 3 Mile Island accident happened. And I switched to my family business and went to oil and gas. I've been working in oil and gas. In August will be my 50th year working in oil and gas. The last 5 years I've been a nuclear advocate.
thanks for being here.
Okay, Sandridge, his mother. I lived outside the country for 20 years, and it's an education for me to be here today.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Yes.
I'm Selena Tipton. I go to UCO. I'm majoring in forensic science and engineering physics.
Hi, I'm Edwin Allen. I go to the University of Central Oklahoma. I am currently studying mechanical engineering, and I would like to learn more about nuclear energy and maybe even start working on it.
Welcome.
Hi. Well, I'm the kind of person to answer to all those personal questions. Do not disclose, but I am a friend of Jean's, and I am very nuclear curious, and I'm happy to be here and to learn.
Thank you.
I'm Paula Dinner, also a friend of Jean's, also here to learn.
Wonderful. Let's go to the second row here.
Hi, I'm Kate Jansen. I also go to the University of Central Oklahoma. Right now I'm studying mechanical engineering, and I was just really interested in nuclear energy.
I'm a student at UCL as well. My name is Josh. I studied computer engineering there.
I'm Dan. I'm a mechanical engineer at UCO.
Very nice to meet you. Yes.
I'm Austin Hand. I'm just a nuclear enthusiast. And yeah, I'm actually an alumni from Oklahoma State, so it's nice to be back here. I live out of state now, so
Welcome back.
that's it.
Excellent. Well, thanks for indulging us, right? This usually when we have various workshops, we don't get to at least know the names and why individuals are here or what they do, if they're curious or an advocate or you name it, right? So it was nice to give us that opportunity to do that. I am going to talk a little bit about our energy mix, right? When you look at nuclear within the United States, it's about 20% of our power, and you're looking at about 94 nuclear power plants, or nuclear power plants, And you also have research reactors that are scattered around. Some are at national laboratories, some are at universities, some are standing alone. But when you talk about, as we look at carbon-free or low-carbon emissions, nuclear fits in with your renewables and with other technologies, right? And that makes up about 50% overall. And then when you look at the land mass as well, it's a smaller footprint compared to other energy sources. So what does it look like? And we have a number of these pellets that are on some of the tables. I'm going to pass this one around, right? And uranium is our fuel source, and we are taking that, or we're refining it because you've got the ore and it has other elements within it. We're more interested in the uranium in particular. We need to enrich it to what was naturally occurring. And then we're going to put this into one of our fuel rods, our steel fuel rods. And then we put a number of those together to make up the fuel assembly, and that is what is making up a set of that's making up our core itself. So here, you kind of see what the pellets look like. It's just literally the top part of your index. And they are stacked within the steel rod, or the fuel assembly, and then this is what the fuel assembly looks like, and a series of them go in to make the core of the reactor. Now, spent fuel, we have those in our spent fuel pools, and then some of them will go on to dry cask storage, and that's what this canister, let's go back to the slide again. This is what the canister looks like. We have an individual here to just kind of show you what kind of the size of the dry cask storage looks like. So when we talk about used fuel, there are, as I said earlier, 70 plus sites around the United States. And this map here is kind of showing you where they're located. There are none in Oklahoma, but you're surrounded in other states by various sites. Right now, everything is decentralized, and the hope is to, for many reasons, right, we want to have some centralized locations for our spent fuel. Now, the Independent Spent Fuel Storage Installation, and we love acronyms, so it's FEED, all right. Those 70 sites or so, amounting to about the 90 or so reactors and their spent fuel, are in dry canisters. Some are on site, and then these particular installations, they're transported to those particular locations. And this is what they look like, right? So in distance, they're in rows, and then as you get some close-up pictures of it, you'll see that they're stacked, so to speak. And of course, if you wanted to do a public tour of them, you can do so. I haven't done that yet. But I've heard great things about actually going and taking a look and getting up close. There's nothing like being up close and personal, so to speak, and finding out how we organize and maintain these particular sites. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the history of nuclear, right? Of spent fuel in particular. And we have the kind of the dawn of the industry in the 40s and the 50s, and we will have spent fuel coming from those particular locations that we've been storing on site and near the various facilities. In the 70s, however, we started to look at exploring at the federal level to having storage locations in particular. And then, as you see here, the policy kind of came behind. We always had acts that helped us to move to and utilize the technology. But it wasn't until 1982 that you had the Nuclear Waste Policy Act, which was trying to organize what we did with our spent fuel immediately, interim, and then long term. We had about 7 or so sites picked out for long-term storage, right? And then in the 80s, we kind of narrowed it down to look at Yucca Mountain in particular. With Yucca Mountain, there was of the other sites that were under consideration, there was a recommendation that we would go ahead with that particular site back in the day. And Yucca Mountain is located in Nevada. By 2009, that project was paused for a number of different reasons, right? On the political side, the economic side, and then who really had sovereignty over the land as well. So, with a number of different court cases that came into being. We paused it, but we were still using the technology for power production and other non-energy applications as well. So what were we doing with the spent fuel or the waste that comes from the utilization, or the byproduct actually that comes from utilization of the technology? They were staying in place in those either on site of a power plant or you had your interim storage. So if you had your spent fuel coming out of your pools into the dry cask storage areas on site, right? And then also you had some that were consolidated in those IFC sites that I mentioned earlier. Then in 2012, we started to think about consent-based siting more closely and how it interacted with and worked with our technology as a whole. And then by the time we get to 2017, you had your first draft of what consent-based siting looks like. So instead of having hearings once we made decisions, stepping back and talking about the technology and also talking about what actions we were going to take ahead of time. So that happened in 2017, and the first set of the consortia started, or the 12 that I had mentioned earlier, really came into being in 2023. We had about 2-year contracts to crisscross the United States and get the feedback from various communities. And that's why we're here today. Still, right, as we kind of loop through history, that timeline, we're still utilizing the technology for what we need as part of the energy portfolio to kind of make sure that the population and our economies go, so to speak, right? So when I joined the industry, we had about 104 reactors. Now we're sitting at 94 reactors, and they're kind of the backbone of our energy portfolio, along with natural gas, oil and gas, coal, etc. And over the years, those numbers have shifted accordingly, right? As we learn more and our needs are taken into consideration as to what we need more of and where the resources are located. So what the program for consent-based siting, also now known as collaborative siting, has in mind is that we want to engage, right? And we want to do that as early and as often as possible. And it's not so that we are going to make decisions ahead of time, but that you all are included in those decision-making processes. We want to develop a process that is community-centered, that we're talking more equitably about the technologies that we have, the product and also the byproducts that we have to kind of grapple what we're doing as we advance our various communities and economies. And we want to help determine whether we want to host a facility to manage that spent fuel, and is that aligned with the community needs accordingly. And then lastly, we want to build trust, right? So that then there's an open discussion we're having about the technologies that are presented that we can move our economies and our communities forward with. So we're still in that first stage, right? We're looking at the planning stage and that engagement with various stakeholders. And that's where we want to solicit your feedback, the community feedback, and that collection of that feedback that then will be shared and become part of the decision-making process for the Department of Energy. So why Oklahoma, right? When you think about Oklahoma, it ranks sixth in way of looking at our technologies, various technologies, in particular oil and gas, right? And then also, when you look at their 5 crude oil facilities, and those are key components to the total refining possibilities within the United States. Third in way of wind generation, and then also 42% of Oklahoma's electricity and 94% of the state's total renewable generation. And then also, when we're looking at proven natural gas reserves, you share that distinction with 5 other states out there, right? Where you're looking at Alaska, you're looking at Texas, you're looking at Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Louisiana. There is a connection to Oklahoma and between Oklahoma and nuclear, right? And it dates back. So you're looking back in the 50s where you had uranium mining that was occurring in this area as well. You also had fabrication of fuel. You also had the production of plutonium. And then also, you also had uranium hexafluoride that was used in tank shells. Now, fast forward a little bit, it was good to hear that some individuals were doing their studies in engineering, or nuclear engineering in the past. So you had Oklahoma State as well as the University of Oklahoma. And then in 1973, there were plans to build a nuclear power plant here in the region, right? Now, by the time you get to fast forward the early 80s, that didn't happen, right? So there was a decision that we weren't going to build, or you all were not going to build in the state. And then in 1994, there was an opportunity to have the federal government's host nuclear fuel or nuclear waste on tribal properties, and that was defeated. So there is a connection with Oklahoma as an energy state, and then in particular looking at nuclear technology, both at the beginning and at the byproduct end. So I'm going to pause and hand it over to Native Nuclear, who are going to tell us a little bit more about the personal journey in this particular space.
All right, fantastic. Whoa. First of all, I just want to start off and say we're really honored to be here in Oklahoma to have an opportunity to chat with the community, and especially with tribal communities. The first little overhead there, you probably are wondering, well, why natives? Why is there a native here talking about nuclear power? Well, there's a beautiful picture there of Diablo Canyon Power Plant. That power plant has been operating 40 years, correct me if I'm wrong, producing up to around 10% of the power needs of California. And California is a very large state and has a very large power need. Kind of a unique thing there, in the days that plant was built, it was actually built on one of my ancestral village sites. So our tribal group has a very tight connection with nuclear power. In fact, if you're doing a little survey of tribal groups in the nation, we're considered an outlier because we would probably be one of few that would be leaning towards nuclear power versus some of the others. And so we think we have kind of a unique story to bring to the public, at least a different perspective, maybe stir a little discussion and thought. So with that, again, my name is Scott Lathrop. I'm a member of the Yaktichu Yaktahini tribe. It's a tongue twister, we understand that. If you're in our area and you call us YTT, that's okay, it's not disrespectful, we understand. But the key thing here, I just wanted to share a little bit of information. When I retired from K-12 education, roughly around 2019, I was kind of called into service by our tribe to sit on the Diablo Canyon's nuclear decommissioning panel. And from that period of time until today, I have probably learned more than I need to know about nuclear power. But in doing so, and having that learning take place, what I discovered real quick is that nuclear power aligns quite well with, I want to say, tribal philosophy on the environment. And we'll talk about that a little bit as we go forward. And I think that's kind of like the unique portion of the story that we want to tell. When we first started these little engagements in North Carolina, one of the first things as far as bringing the native story forward that we discovered is that we were talking about the tail end of the process use fuel storage. And in the tribal world, tribal nations, you can't start there. You have to start at the complete beginning of the life cycle. And that's simply because of the historical wrongs that have taken place on tribal lands. And so if you're going to have any success at all engaging tribal communities, you have to go back and talk about that and recognize that, and I want to say come up with a plan forward, that we can all move together on. So when we talk about this, we'll be talking a little bit about, oh, my pointer's not working. Oh, there it is. We'll be talking about a little bit of mining process, the whole fabrication, going into the actual generation, and then back around where we're talking about used fuel storage. And so our presentation will kind of hit on those little areas, really high levels. So first of all, you may be aware that Native people are very much storytellers. Our histories and everything is based on stories. So I think we have kind of a unique story, but we believe it's a shared story. It's all of our shared story. And it's something that needs to be recognized and discussed a little bit. I'll be talking a little bit about the mining cycle, generation, and also used fuel management, which my colleague over here will kind of speak to that a little bit. So starting with that, whenever you talk to Native people, the one issue that comes up quite often is the issues that have happened on Navajo land. And they were pretty well impacted greatly about the whole nuclear industry process. You can see in 1948, the Atomic Energy Commission had a real strong desire, real strong direction because of the fact that we were, into the war aspect. There was kind of like a nuclear, kind of a terrible thing as far as trying to beat everybody to build the next bomb or whatever the case may be. And so there was a real push to get uranium. And it just so happens that on Navajo land, there was a lot of uranium. So all these things started to happen, uranium or the Navajo land was opened up to contractors to come in and mine. And, there was leases put out. And of course, all that ended in 1967. But the thing is, initially, when we look at the outcomes for Native people with this whole issue, at first it was like, this is maybe an economic opportunity, created jobs, things of that nature. But what happened is that we have a legacy mines, meaning that, after this period, there was a lot of things that were left on site that were not good for Native people. It caused a lot of different health issues. And even today, there's issues about getting, I want to say, any kind of restitution for that process. Typically, I would call this the good, the bad, and the ugly, meaning it wasn't really a good time. And it also ties, that we have to recognize, to what we're trying to do today, and that is engage. This time period, there wasn't really any community engagement. There was basically just kind of ran over. And this is a stumbling block when we talk with Native groups, and it has to be kind of addressed as we go forward. Moving forward, there's an opportunity for all of us to rebuild that trust. And probably some of the entities that need to work hard at this is an entity like the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. I put this up as an example because on Navajo land again, essentially there's a cleanup need, a big time cleanup need. And right now there are different systems out there that potentially could create that opportunity for cleanup. Systems that are acceptable to Native people, but yet we have a stumbling block, which is the Nuclear Regulatory Agency, because of the permitting of these processes. And so this was a return letter that we got because we were supporting this new process. Basically saying you really need to approve this process and allow the Native people to take care of this issue. So we're saying reestablishing what the federal government could do is essentially get out of the way and allow these things to happen. Or go ahead and go back and try to resolve some of these problems that are out there. Moving forward, I just wanted to talk a little bit, kind of like the middle story, the generation side, talking about environment, land stewardship, community benefits, and of course, knowledge over fear. Give you a little bit of at least our tribal philosophy of the environment, and I think it's pretty traditional in different tribal groups. You know, we believe we live in the three realms of the world. In fact, we all live in the three realms of the world, which we call Mother Earth, Father Sky, and water, the lifeblood, if you will, of everything living in those realms. And we believe that those realms have to be in balance, that we have a personal connection with those areas. So when we look at animals, we look at mountain ranges, rivers, we don't look at them as resources or objects. We see them as a relative, somebody that you need to love and care for. And so that's a different mindset that you might find in the Westernly world. Planning, we also plan for 7 generations. We're always thinking about way down the road. Quite often today, we Westernly kind of thinking is, maybe if you're lucky, the current generation. And of course, we believe that those 3 realms and how we work together is everyone's responsibility and our shared responsibility that we should. So we look at things, whether it's generating power or whatever, from a this lens, a little bit different perspective. So with that, let's talk a little bit more about land stewardship. I have to point out this beautiful coast here. This is 14 miles of the Pacho Coast. And that's my ancestral homeland. And about right in here, somewhere in that neighborhood, there's an ancestral village of Ja'iwi, which stands for breast, like breast of a bird. And I can trace my lineage back to that specific village site. So when we talk to people about our ancestral territory, we are very concerned about that relationship. We kind of say that it's sort of like, falling on the sword kind of thing. We also have a saying that we love our homeland and we want you to love it too. And also I would just welcome all of you to come there. And if you do, look me up and we'll have a good time. But the reason I wanted to show you this is that over here we have Diablo Canyon. And the industrial area, all the buildings and everything are right around 75 to 100 acres. So keep that in your mind, because as we look at the total life cycle environmental impact, by technology, up here at the top is nuclear. Way down at the bottom here is this biomass. Okay? What we're trying to show by that chart is that when you talk about the impact on the environment and you're looking at the complete cycle, nuclear by far has the smallest footprint on those 3 realms. Remember, we were talking about those 3 realms. So nuclear really aligns, at least with our tribal philosophy of how you would protect the environment. The idea is you take very little, you maximize the benefit out of that, and you return very little back to the environment. So all these other sources of generation, they have their application and their purpose, don't get me wrong. But when you look at on a scale, I don't understand as a native person why we're not just all running after the nuclear side. I kind of understand because of the radiation aspect, but I think Dr. Hayes will be kind of talking to about that later, which puts it in, I think, a better light. So moving forward, I also wanted to point out that in our area with having the plant there, originally it might have been like, this is maybe not a good idea. But in hindsight, it's been an excellent partner, excellent neighbor, because it has protected the environment there. Around that plant that I showed you, there's 12,000, something like that, acres of pristine land that really has very little human contact with. The coastline, 14 miles pristine. So in reality, that plant, because it's there, has protected our environment. And believe me, if you have a chance to go there, definitely take the boat ride because it's pretty amazing. So it's like an added benefit, like a side benefit that needs to be probably highlighted, okay? I wanted to show you this because I find this very interesting. The picture to the left, it says 81. Well, about 78, 79, somewhere in that neighborhood, I was working for the county building and planning department. And my first experience with the plant was during this time that they were under construction. I was a young pup then, right? But I was able to go out and see the plant on some work that we were doing for the county. And because I have kind of a construction background, I was just amazed with the construction. I actually got to see the dome, rebar going in place, and rebar is gigantic. And so from my perspective, I never really ever had an issue with the construction of the plant. Well, now I'm going to slingshot all the way to 2018. I said earlier that I sit on the PG&E's panel. Well, that's one of our documents. If you look that up, you can Google it. It's like a 115-page document. It's basically the community's vision for Diablo Canyon lands in the event the plant would be decommissioned. There was a time that the state had this not so bright idea to decommission the plant. And so that's how that document got created. Ideally, from my perspective only, I believe the plant's gonna go on for a long time simply because California needs the power, greatly needs the power. But if you have a chance, Google that and you'll find a lot of good information about what the community feels. And I would say if you did a survey of the community, it's 70 plus in favor of nuclear. And here's some of the reasons why it's a big plus in the neighborhood, if you will. Right now, there's been some reports done by the local college, Cal Poly State University, and they're estimating around $1.4 billion goes into the economy from Diablo Canyon. That's a chunk of change for the local community. And you can see there's different levels, direct and indirect. There's a lot of people, coffee shops and restaurants and all those kinds of things, those indirects that are kind of spin off. There's a good looking crew there. If the reason this report was done is that they wanted to know what was going to be the economic loss if Diablo Canyon was shut down. Well, they estimate it would go down to $15 million. Now that is that's community benefit or the issue of community. That was a big issue that needed to be addressed if the plant was going to be. And then I just want to show here that when you take a look at salaries, this is 80,000. Yeah. So if you're living in San Luis Obispo, you don't want to see those jobs go away. And we're talking about 1,200, 1,500 jobs. And that's a big deal. Plus, those people are in the community, supporting, the service groups, helping out with all the youth things and all that kind of stuff. So, from a standpoint of economic benefit, it's really a big driver, a big deal. And then what I'd like to do is kind of bring Ryan up. He's going to kind of talk a little bit about the whole idea of used fuel sightings and all that kind of stuff. Okay, great.
Thank you, Scott. I like this table, but I don't love it.
I like the neighborhood too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Scott. My name is Ryan Pickering. I'm from California as well. I met Scott because I was a big anti-nuclear person a few years ago, and I became very interested in Diablo Canyon. It became this kind of cultural moment in California, and I figured, why don't we look up the native people in the area, get their perspective of it, and that's how I met Scott. And Scott said, "Hey, why don't we we have coffee? And Heather Hoff was there, I had just met her, and I heard his perspective, and ever since then I've been asking to work with him, and so grateful that the Department of Energy has put us together. And I will say I've changed my perspective about nuclear over the past few years, and I'm still learning, and I think everyone's kind of going through this reevaluation of our energy systems as energy realism sets in. Okay, so I like to show this because what's the scope of the challenge? We love talking about nuclear energy and all energy forms, but really our charter from the Department of Energy is to work on this Use Nuclear Fuel challenge. And currently we're here in Oklahoma where there are exactly 0 nuclear fuel canisters to my knowledge. And I think that's official, there are 0 here. But that doesn't mean that we're all paying into the federal government's responsibility to manage this fuel. And so we've gone around the country. We had a experience in Illinois that we shared with the community. Of course, they have the most nuclear fuel. Nuclear energy was invented in Illinois, so they have the most, and they have many nuclear plants. Over in California, we have about 100 canisters as well. And it's time for us to start moving that around according to the federal government. And I think now in this moment with knowledge over fear and what Scott is talking about, we've observed a lot about nuclear fuel and we understand it much more thoroughly. So I think it's time to start acting with confidence. Learning from the past. Lisa mentioned Yucca Mountain, and yeah, that was a learning experience. And I think what we learned is, there were a couple sites chosen, but essentially the federal government said it's going here. And I think that's a great way to create a bunch of problems for yourself by federally mandating something and essentially creating community resistance. And so there was a lack of collaboration, and of course, Yucca Mountain was near the nuclear weapons testing site, so there's already some sensitivity there. And of course, it is native land, so 2 different tribes stepped forward and said that, this can't move forward. It was litigated heavily, and ultimately the project was paused. And there's a pricey consequence to that. Beyond the loss of trust, it was billions in federal dollars. Now, we may reactivate that site someday, but the federal government has decided to go in a new direction with a grassroots approach, a nationwide outreach effort for consent-based siting, saying, who would want this? Instead of mandating a top-down, we're trying to grow it from the grassroots, saying, is there anyone interested in this? And that's our charter over the next 2 years. Thankfully, there's a lot of bipartisan support for nuclear energy. In fact, the ADVANCE Act, which passed in Washington, D.C. last year, was one of the most popular pieces of legislation in American history, with only 4 votes against it, and in the House and Senate. And so I think we're all kind of seeing there's this rethinking of this technology going on, and that's certainly different than when Yucca Mountain was paused 20 years ago. Or when was Yucca Mountain paused? Maybe 14 years ago. And finally, a reprocessing technology. I think with Scott Lathrop's leadership and others saying, hey, we need to get a lot more out of this uranium. There's science has caught up and said that, not only is this do we understand what nuclear fuel is, but it's also remarkably valuable and can be recycled and used again for more and more fuel, and the radioactivity can be used and used and used so that it's not quite so radioactive in the canisters, because that radioactivity is just potential energy. Oh, and this is the Atlas rail car. This is another thing that's new, is we have the ability to move it by rail. And so we'll be talking about that a little bit, but this is a new rail car, and that is one of the nuclear fuel canisters, firmly in place. So we're talking about collaborative sightings. Here are some of the basics. We do believe that there's shared responsibility. Whether you support nuclear energy or not, it produces 20% of our electricity today, and we have 3,000 canisters around the country that the federal government is legally required to move around. So it's kind of all of our issue that we can work towards solving together. There's enormous economic and social benefits. Whoever the communities that decide to host this will receive quite a bit of federal investment, jobs, and infrastructure improvement. So there's upside beyond just having the honor of storing our nation's nuclear fuel. And finally, there's an open invitation for anyone to apply. I am almost amazed by how few requirements there are to apply. You can rent land and apply. I'm not sure you'll win it. But as a joke, early in this process, I applied at my family's farm. It's a 5-acre farm. We could, I think, hold 8 canisters. And they said, we're not taking applications at this time, but I just wanted to kind of test the waters and see what was out there. And so the invitation to apply has not been published yet. But I expect it to be within the next 12 months, and we'll be sharing that with those interested. We see this as a new chapter, and it's not a short chapter either. The Department of Energy gave us 12 years total to work on this. We're almost 2 years in, and we'll be working with communities who are interested in it, and that is, our charter, and we're so grateful for it. And this photo is a nuclear fuel from a decommissioned nuclear plant, and that was 50 years of nuclear fuel. It was a small plant, but it's pretty remarkable how well the nuclear effort contains its byproducts. We would love to stay in touch. Native Nuclear is a new nonprofit that Scott has founded, and our charter is really reaching out to Native people and sharing with them this opportunity, but this is our shared responsibility. So we look forward to talking with you together, and we'll end it with this quote from Sitting Bull: "Let us put our minds together and see what life we can make for our children." At this time, we'd love to take some questions before we move over to our sisters at Mothers for Nuclear.
I have a question. Do you have to have different building requirements, like in California where they have earthquakes, and like here we have tornadoes? Are they all, I'm sure you take all that into consideration when you're building these?
Yeah, it's a good question. Those are not shallow pieces of concrete. They go quite deep, and in California, they're even deeper, is my understanding. So just to be up to that.
And no doubt about it, whatever state this facility might wind up with, they're going to have to comply with state, construction law. Probably is going to be more than state requirements, because that seems to be the trend for any kind of nuclear development.
Was her question, how big are those containers?
The height of them?
Her question was more about the seismic concrete that it sits on.
I'm sorry, I apologize. I was going to say the size would that be about the diameter that.
Oh, you mean this circle part?
The platform there.
Yeah, they're quite large. Maybe we recall 14 feet tall and about.
The canisters are bigger.
16 feet tall, yeah, and then they have a nice wide base on them. Couldn't tip it over if you wanted to. And they are bolted to the ground as well, and they've been thoroughly tested, and Dr. Hayes will talk to you about the robustness of those canisters.
Question up there?
Yeah. Now, Ryan, I have heard several people saying the thought of Yucca Mountain and gathering things in is an answer to a problem that doesn't exist. Because these are so safe and they're so well done in place. Doing Yucca Mountain and the turmoil with this is an answer for a problem that doesn't exist.
I can let Scott start on that, but yeah, it's an interesting perspective.
It's kind of funny if you're coming from at least this one tribal perspective, if you will. I have a problem with the fact that when you look at one of those canisters, there's still a lot of capability, and so that doesn't align with tribal thinking of maximizing that creator-given or man-made resource. And my understanding, I'm not a nuclear engineer, I don't know this, but my understanding is if they can be reprocessed or if they can be reloaded into a new type of reactor, then why aren't we doing this? Because we all have a responsibility to maximize our resource instead of wasting it. I always tell the story, this is what we're doing. I'll give you $100, okay? but you can only spend $5 of that. And then you're gonna take the other 95, put it in a can, and bury it in the ground. We're all in the room would say, you know, why would we do that? That's not very wise. It's not a good use of resources. That's sort of like what we're doing when we say, put these things in Yucca Mountain, let's bury them. You know, and I say, no, they're real safe. I understand they're designed for like 100 years or something weird like that. I say, well, why don't we let all the new generation smart engineers in the room innovate a little bit? Let's make use of that resource as time goes on. So I have kind of a flippant answer from my community. I said, well, give me all the canisters you can, because I'm thinking 7 generations, meaning somewhere down the road, my ancestors are gonna sell it back to the people that need the power. You know, so I don't need Yucca Mountain. But yeah, we might need Yucca Mountain for a lot of smaller quantity of waste. Maybe a little more potent. But the point that I'm trying to make is, before we really think about burying it, we need to maximize it. Then we don't have to do more mining on especially tribal territory. And right now, you know, with the other generation sources, I mean, I tell my kids on the side, hey, if you're gonna invest in the stock, you might as well go invest in mining, because the craziness of the world, mining is expected to grow 300 to 500%. So if you're only thinking about making dollars, maybe that might be the place, but I'm over there saying, no, we don't need that mining. We have a lot of resource that we're not maximizing simply because we're not going to that next step, which is innovation. Yeah, anyway, I'll get off my soapbox.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I just wanted to take her question to a little more general level, in that when you talk about Yucca Mountain, you're talking about a repository, which is someplace where you put it and it's there forever, as opposed to storage, where you can retrieve it and reuse it, recycle it, turn it into whatever. I think the DOE, in a way, kind of put the cart before the horse with the collaborative consent-based siting program, in that we need to first decide, what do we really want to do with this stuff? And then we worry about where we put it. Do we want to recycle it, which France has done, which I think France is the only, where's Dr. Hayes? France is the only country that's recycling now, isn't it?
There are a number of countries that
Are there a number of countries?
Japan as well.
Yeah, at any rate, if France can make it work, my God, US will.
Yeah, I think it's when Yucca Mountain was first planned, we knew a lot less about the properties of nuclear fuel and how to recycle it. And now we see there's a large economic opportunity in doing that. And I think in a world we can have it both ways, but I think to your point, and the cart before the horse, I think DOE is trying to catch up with the American public, who is rapidly changing their mind about this technology. And before it was kind of like, put it underground, get it out of here, it's the worst thing ever. And now people are like, Scott's saying, give it to me, and so everyone's like, wait a second, why does the native guy want all the nuclear fuel? So I think there's a really incredible sociological moment going on, and I'm grateful for professionals like you who can speak to some of the technical details of it.
Other questions?
So you're trying to currently encourage native populations to not only be forward for nuclear energy, but also for nuclear energy storage.
Well, let me correct you right
I'm
there.
sorry.
Tribal people look at their own territory as a very sovereign people. It's up to them to make their own decisions. I'm not here today to try to encourage anybody to do anything. I'm here to try to share information so that people will be in a better position to make their own decision. So let me correct you there. No, we're not here to try to win over anybody on any kind of thing. I just want to share our experience, because I think it has value, and I believe that tribal groups should be elevated. Their voice needs to be elevated and included in the discussion, so that they'll be well informed to make their own decision what's best for their own area. So
Is there a second aspect to your question?
Well, I was just wondering, I do know that there are some tribes that have lots of land out in the deserts. And I was wondering if they decided to come forward, would that be a better place to use for nuclear use fuel storage because it has less impact on potential populations?
Well, I was just talking to Dr. Hayes about this earlier because it's, and we'll be employing Lisa's expertise there. It's a geography challenge because we need to be near the rail lines and we need to have the space, about a good couple hundred acres to land this. But really, from a environmental perspective, and we met with some tribal community leaders yesterday, and they were really interested in what the environmental impact would be. And from our perspective and our studies of the last 2 years, it's there's not a quantifiable environmental impact from hosting one of these sites. And really, as long as we could get the fuel there, any population center, any community, any person could house this fuel, and we would, as long as it was built to local building standards. And these sites are generally designed to last 100 years. It's an interim facility.
Take him one step further too. In terms of environmental impacts, if the site is chosen correctly and if the site is engineered correctly, the single largest environmental impact is the economy. The number of jobs it creates, the number of people it pulls into the community, what level of technical expertise those people have, the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker. So
yeah, we certainly have seen prosperity leads to environmental protection, and so bringing capital into these communities and investment into these communities generally leads across the United States. It's generally true that then we have more resources to put towards things. Yes. Oh, we could do this all day. I want to thank you all, and we will move on to Mothers for Nuclear.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.